I'm Elaine Frantz, and I'm here to tell you about my project, which it uses historical network analysis to locate the Ku Klux Klan in Union County, South Carolina, right after the Civil War. And so I'll talk to you a little bit about how the project happened, and then a little bit about how you might think about using network analysis for your own project if you are working on a history project or maybe even another humanities project. So the problem that I was facing with finding the Klan in Union County is that the people who were in the Klan, obviously it was secret. They never identified themselves. And while the federal government did ultimately arrest a bunch of people, it's sort of unclear they arrested the right people. We couldn't assume that that was the case. And so what I wanted to do was try to figure out who were these people within the Klan. And the insight that I had, my reading of the Klan, was that Klan violence actually was continuous with local patterns of violence. So I suspected that if I wanted to find the Klan, what I really had to do was find who were the existing criminal actors in Union County before and after this period of time who were identified, right? And then also find the people who were attacked by the Klan, because we did have their identities, and figure out how they were connected to, if they were connected to any people who were existing local violent actors. And so that was my hunch, right? That if I looked at these things together, I would find something interesting. And in fact, I'm going to say it worked. So, but in order to do that, I had to use the really powerful tool of network analysis. Okay. Basically, what this is, what I started with was 3,200 documents like the one you're looking at there. That's a case file, and that's actually a picture from inside the South Carolina Department of Archives and History, where I'm working through them. Each of those case files includes a lot of information, but most importantly for me, each case file is an accusation, right? Somebody is accusing somebody of something. And each case file includes the names of the people who are doing the accusation, the people who have been accused, and also the witnesses who are named, and also the bondsmen, almost always bondsmen, sometimes bondswomen, I guess, but almost always bondsmen, who are named in this. And sometimes, so basically in each of these case files, there's between 2, because sometimes they don't have all the information, between 2 and 30 individual names, usually something like 6. Right. And so what I had was a pattern of relationships that existed that I knew from the county revolving around violence. And so I was interested to see if I could make a map of what the relationships in Union County were that revolved around violent encounters and hostile encounters. So to do this, I decided to use something called network analysis and taught myself network analysis in order to do this. And network analysis is it's a pretty simple tool. It's very easy to get started with. And that's the good thing about network analysis. You can create a network today. You can create a network in an hour, right? And then, of course, once you start working on it, you can also work on it for however long you want, and keep on getting more complicated and better at it. But basically what network analysis is, it's a system of representing relationships, and what we call relational data. And the primary terms you need to know are nodes and edges. So nodes are the things that you are trying to connect to each other, the relationship among which you are interested in analyzing, right? And so in my case, that was people in Union County, South Carolina, who appeared in the criminal database, right? Edges are the lines between those nodes, and the edges show each edge, which is a line between the nodes. So say like James to Emma, in this case, is the edge. Each edge indicates that there's a connection between those people. Those edges can have special qualities. Those edges can have weight. So you can say, oh, there's a bigger or a more important or less important connection between those people. They can also be arcs. They could be bidirectional or going in one direction or another. They could be directed or undirected. So there's a whole bunch of different things you can do with it. But basically, you have nodes, which are the things you're interested in connecting, and you have edges, which are the things that connect them. And what network analysis can do is do three basic kinds of analysis on those nodes and edges. It can tell you, once you put in the information about the nodes and edges, it can tell you qualities of those nodes. It can say, well, which nodes are the most important? Which nodes are the most central? And it has a whole bunch of ways of naming those and describing them. And then it also can tell you subsets of nodes. It can say, well, which nodes are connected in a meaningful way? Which nodes, in which subsets of nodes are all of them connected? It can tell you a whole bunch of things. It can break it up into a whole bunch of ways using various kinds of mathematical processes. Okay. And then the third thing it can do is it can tell you qualities of the graph itself or qualities of the entire network. It can say, how closely connected is this network? How hard is it for one person in the network to get to a random other person in the network, right? And there's a whole bunch of technical terms it has to describe those things, but basically it can describe the qualities of the graph, and then you can compare the qualities of one graph to the qualities of another graph, and that becomes very interesting. So is historical network analysis a solution to your particular historical question? Or this could also work for other areas of the humanities. And the question you have to ask yourself is, first, do you have dense relational data? Do you have a dense group of people or other entities that that are connected to each other in a dense way? And I find, anyway, that unless that's true, historical network analysis won't be useful or interesting to you. Secondly, you have to ask yourself, what does your data do and what does it not do? So in my case, my data cannot tell me, for instance, who actually attacked whom in Union County during this time. It can tell me who reported to the sheriff that somebody attacked them, right? And so what I have is a network, not necessarily exactly of who did what, but I have a network of who was in conflict with whom and made allegations against whom. So I have a network of allegations, which hopefully has some relationship to the network of actual violent acts, but I have to know that's what my data does. Third, can I answer my question by understanding the patterns and structures of the relationships that I have data for? In my case, I was hoping that the answer was yes. You have to, and most historical questions cannot be answered with historical network analysis. But you have to, in my case it could, because that's precisely what I was interested in, is what are the patterns of these violent relationships over time. Okay, so I had to do three things. First, I had to build a database. Second, I had to create what we're going to call an edge list. And then third, I had to process and analyze the network that I created. So the first thing I did was build a database. And building a database for me had two different steps. The first is that I took the case files, and you saw that case file in one of the first slides, and I had to make it into a spreadsheet. And I converted that information into an Excel spreadsheet. It took a really long time, but I got it all in there. And then the second step, which actually was even more time consuming, was converting the spreadsheet to a database. In this case, I used an Access database, but you could use something else. And the important part of converting the spreadsheet to the database was that for various technical reasons, that was a crucial way that I could clean and standardize the data. Okay, so I needed to make sure that if there was a guy named John Smith and there was a guy named John W. Smith and there was a guy named J. Smith III, I decided who was the same person for my purposes. Okay, second, you need to decide on the rules ahead of time. Make sure to do that when you do this. Decide on the rules ahead of time. Decide how you're going to clean, what process you're going to use when cleaning. Keep good notes as you do it so that you know how you've standardized the data. And then eventually when you finish, you're actually going to need to turn it back into a spreadsheet form so that you can convert it back to the edge list. The second step was creating an edge list. Okay, when I created my edge list, the edge list is the fundamental data format for network analysis. It's the format that the network's able to read. There are automated ways to do this through network analysis programs that will convert your spreadsheets to edge list, or there's easy tools you can find on the internet to convert your format to edge lists. Okay, finally, I had to process and analyze the network. And you can see here an image of one of the steps. Is kind of a sloppy because this is my working process, where I produced this network using these tools. I actually used two tools. I used Project and I used Gephi. And the Project is a little bit more technical and the Gephi's a little more pretty. So I ended up using a combination of them. And so I was able to then sort of spit out what the relationships were. This is a particular subset that I broke down, so, using a certain partition in the data that shows some of the key players in the story that I was telling. A lot of these guys end up being the Klansmen. Okay, so you can see, and then using a Project and Gephi, I'm actually able to project it and visualize it. And then finally, using that system, I was able to get all sorts of different analyses of the, and this is my book. I was able to get all sorts of different analyses of the networks. All sorts of different analyses of the networks, which I was able to use in various ways for my own purposes and also for visually describing them in the book itself. So I recommend that you try network analysis. It actually is not too hard to get started with. There's a whole bunch you can do with it once you get moving, but it's definitely worth giving a try if you have historical relational data that you want to analyze.